Hello guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be continuing back on the logic series, where we're going to be continuing our series on Isagoge, or Isagoge by Porphyry, and this is, like I've said, one of the most fundamental books to read if you're into logic, especially formal logic, right? So let's get into difference, which is one of the 5 predicables, and as I've said, the 5 predicables is anything that a universal idea can express. That is a genus, a species, a difference, an accident, or a property. And today we are going to be covering difference. Okay, now the term difference has a common meaning and a proper meaning, but also a strict meaning. So a common meaning is really simple. It's basically one thing is said to differ from another thing when you mean by otherness, it differs in any way at all. And by any way at all, I mean, like, for example, if you take 2 people, John and Matthew, John can differ from Matthew simply because he has a blue backpack. Um, Matthew can differ from John because he has glasses, right? This is when there's any type of difference, right? It doesn't matter whether it's specific, accidental, it's anything that distinguishes a thing from another thing. Um, all right. And so yeah, there's a example I gave right here. Socrates differs from Plato and from himself since he was a child and then became a man, or he is changing by qualitative degree. The proper meaning is properly is when 2 things differ due to some inseparable accident. Now, if you don't know what the term accident means in this case, I recommend you watch Aristotle's Categories or one of my De Ente videos, but I'll quickly explain it. So an accident an accident is one of the 5 predicables. And basically, an accident is predicated of a subject that is a substance or a noun. And accidents are really not weird, but their existence depends on a subject. For example, an accident is like white, sitting down, right? Eating. All of these are accidents, right? Because substance is the most primary category in the categories, while, the 9 accidents. And so accidents only have existence relative to the substance. Unlike the substance, which has primary existence. So an accident is always predicated of something and never predicated never predicated of. So an accident is always predicated of something. For example, this tree is green, where green is the accident, because a tree could be pink, whatever, right? But yeah, so for the proper meaning of difference, take the example of the grayness of the eyes or a scar from the wound. Or you could say skin, right? So for example, some men are black and white, and these people differ due to some inseparable accident, that is the skin color, because it's not removable, right? By accident, it means that it's something that is not essential to a thing, and it's more like, I don't want to say this too much, but there are separable and inseparable accidents, and so these inseparable accidents can include skin color, right? Maybe physical attributes concerning the hands, and as I've said, the color of your eyes, right? Although these can, logically change and stuff, these are what we call inseparable accidents. 3. Strict meaning. So the strict meaning of difference in the strict meaning is when 2 things differ when they differ because of a specific difference. Now, I want you to really, really hone in into the word specific, right? It's very important that you grasp the word specific difference, because specific difference is relating to the difference in species. For example, a man, right, man is a species, differs from horse because man has the quality rational. Rational is a specific difference. Why? Because it distinguishes man as a species from horse as a species, and so on as ox, blah, 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 right? And so, in general, every difference added to something always changes it or modifies it in a certain way. Now, common and proper difference changes something and makes it different in quality, but not essence, right? So the proper and the common do not affect the nature of something. They do not affect the essence. It doesn't matter if I have white skin, black skin. I'm still gonna retain fundamental human nature. Although you can argue that I do have an individuated nature, that is, like Aquinas says, but absolutely, there is two ways to consider the nature of a thing. You can consider it absolutely and secondarily. Secondarily is when we consider the accidents within the essence, and that's going to be individuated essence. But right now, that is another topic of discussion. Now, strict differences make something differ in essence. So that are specific differences, right? So the specific differences modifies the essence, right? And thus we say that some differences are qualitative and some are essential. So some differences that are qualitative could be like white, black, accidents, right? And essential are ones what separate species from another. Okay, so specific difference makes something differ in nature or essence. Simple difference just makes something differ in quality. And it is from essential or essential differences or specific differences, that is the differences that divide the species. These are also the divisions of genus into species. So the genus is really just one until it is divided by all these differences, and then this creates a bunch of species. And these species arise, and this is where the definitions come from. And you need to note that a definition is comprised of a genus plus a specific difference, right? So a quick definition, or a definition of a definition, according to Aristotle, is one that signifies the essence of a thing, right? So it's not merely an effect, right? A good definition is one that tells us what a thing is, what the essence, what the nature is signified, right? And so, for example, if we were to define man, we would say man is rational animal. See, where rational is the specific difference. Why? Because rational is what distinguishes us from other animals. Animal is our genus. And thus we can say man is rational animal. Okay, but when you're talking about qualitative differences, common and proper differences and changes in qualitative degree take place or occur. And so Porphyry also makes it clear that there are separable and inseparable differences, as I've gave already, and some include moving, resting, being healthy, being ill. This is because they are just temporary, right? I'm ill at another time. You know, I'm sick sometimes, as you guys know, and sometimes I'm healthy, sometimes I'm moving, sometimes I'm lazy, right? These are really just separable differences, and some inseparable differences exist essentially and some accidentally. For example, rationality, moral capable of laughing. These are inseparable differences. And inseparable differences can be accidents. That is, a man could be white or black. So really, what you need to take here is that inseparable differences are twofold. So some of them, one is you can have an essential inseparable difference, right? Things pertaining to the nature of a man. So like capable of laughing pertains or follows from the nature of a man, but not white or black. And white or black is really just inseparable accidents, right? We call these inseparable differences or accidents. Now, differences which are essential or per se, really per se and essential just really mean the same thing here, are in the definition of a substance and make another essence. But it is clear that accidental differences are not a part of the definition and do not make another essence, but rather only a difference in quality. And if you're confused by that, I have the example here on the slide. For example, if we define man as being rational, because that's an essential difference since it distinguishes man from other species, we cannot define man as being white or black or lazy or anything like that, because that's only an accident, right? And we'd be confusing what's accidental with essential, which is kind of like the accident fallacy or the accidental fallacy, right? It's confusing what is essential for what is accidental, or accidental with essential. And also, essential differences do admit of degrees, and that is really the concept of being more or less. But accidental differences do also admit degrees, and if they are inseparable and accidental, they also increase and decrease. The genus, as it is, can never be predicated as if it ever admitted degrees, meaning more or less, nor are even differences of the genus by which a genus is divided. And so really what this means is like man is not more or less of an animal than a horse. Man is not more or less of an animal than, let's say, a ox, right? They're equally animals in as much, right? An animal is predicated univocally, and that's one of the properties, as I've said, is the property of a genus. That is, it's univocally predicated of its species. Sorry guys, just had to make a quick edit in the video. So if you're seeing a new slide, this is actually a new slide. What I changed was I realized, because you know, when I was making this video, I was like, what the heck, you know, like, essential differences do not seem like they admit degrees, and that was actually a fault on mine. So if I do say anything wrong, please correct me. So I just fixed it, but essential differences, correct me, that is, they do not admit of degrees. So things that exist per se do not admit of degrees, or that are per se in terms of differences. That is the concept of more or less. So because, for example, essential differences are rational, a man is not more rational than another man, and you know that is the essential difference. But the accidental differences, it doesn't matter if they are inseparable or, you know, whatever. They do admit degrees, and they increase or decrease. So please note, essential differences do not admit of degrees. Alright, moving on. So the genus can never be predicated as it ever admitted degrees, as I've said, right? There's no such thing as a species being more of an animal than a horse, right? Because if that's the case, then you'd be predicating equivocally, right? But that's fallacious, right? Because as we've established in logic, the property of a genus is one that it is always predicated univocally of its species, or it can be, right? And so now, moving on, we say that differences complete the definition of each thing. Thus, the being of each thing is one and the same, and does not at all admit degrees, but accidents do admit degrees. So we have seen three species of difference. The separable difference, stuff like sitting, being healthy, being ill, being lazy, right? These are temporary. The inseparable difference is qualities like being white or black, having blue eye colors. The inseparable differences that are essential are per se, and the inseparable difference by accident, as we've noted. So the inseparable difference essentially is one that modifies the nature of a thing, right? So this would be like rationality. Modifies the nature of man and distinguishes him from, you know, let's say brutes. Okay, so however, there are among essential differences some that we are able to divide genus into species, and some by which the divided genus are constituted as species. For example, excuse me. While animals have many essential differences, such as rational or irrational, mortal and immortal, it is being animate and sensible that constitutes the essence or the nature of animal, since an animal is an animate, sensible substance. And so the differences mortal and immortal and rational and irrational divide the genus animal into species, since genus or genera are distinguished into species by such differences, right? And although these differences divide, they also complete the genus and become constitutive of the species. For example, animal is divided both by the difference rational and irrational, right? Because the genus animal can have irrational animals like a horse, a cow, a pig, and it also has rational animals like humans, right? And so by the difference mortal and immortal as well. However, we say that rational and mortal constitutes man, while rational and immortal constitute God. But yeah. And thus, as Porphyry says it, since the difference animate and inanimate, that of sensible and insensible, divide the highest substance, animate and sensible, combined with substance, makes animal, while animate and insensible complete plant. Since, therefore, the same differences understood in one way become constitutive and in another way become divisive, they are all called specific. These differences are especially useful both for the divisions of genus or genera and for definitions. But inseparable accidental differences and, still more, separable differences are not useful for this purpose. So, only uh, only differences that are essential or per se are what we're really going to use for definitions, right? We never define man as being lazy or white. Rather, we define man by his difference and his genus, rational animal. And so the ancients have also defined difference as that by which the species exceeds the genus. For example, the species man possesses more than just the genus animal, because it also has rational and mortal, and the genus animal is none of this, right? Because the genus is supposed to be undivided. Nor does the genus animal possess all contradictory differences at once, since the same thing cannot have opposing traits simultaneously. So this is a really key thing, right? Because the genus is supposed as a undivided thing until divided by species. Because note that if the genus animal, possesses all these contradictory differences as, irrational and rational at once, that would be a contradiction. So rather, it possesses them potentially, not actually, and all the differences of the subordinate species. Thus, nothing arises from non-existence, and contradictories will not exist at the same time in the same subject. And so, that's really important for you to note down, right? And so the ancients also define difference as that which is predicated of many things qualitatively, but differ in species. So really, this will take you back to the question, what is man? Now, the answer to the question is simple. Man is an animal. But we need to be careful now, because we also can define man as rational animal. But the response that man is rational animal is really more of a proper response to the question, what sort of animal is man? And mortal and rational is predicated of man not essentially, but qualitatively, right? And so we then should properly say rational and mortal. And so we need to note that mortal and rational are not the essence of man. Rather, it is a part of the nature of man, right? And so because things are composed of matter and form, and by the way, if you don't know what that is, please look into my old videos on Aristotle's metaphysics and hylomorphism. But basically, because things are composed of matter and form, just as a statue is made up of matter and form, so the universal man is composed of something like matter, which is the genus, and the form, which is the difference. And difference is what naturally separates the species under the same genus. And also, difference is that by which singulars differ. As man and horse do not differ in genus, yet we are distinguished by a horse because we are rational, right? And so we must also clarify something unclear. Difference is not a random trait or random characteristic of a random characteristic that divides species under the same genus, but it is what contributes to the being and is part of the essence of a thing. For example, the natural inclination to sell or laugh is a property of man, but is not a difference, while rationality, although is said of man qualitatively as a difference, it still constitutes the being and is part of the nature and what it is to be man, right? And plus, we could say that some animals have the natural tendency to sell, but then we just divide one group and separate it from the other. And secondly, the natural tendency to sell doesn't even complete substance as a genus, since we've already said that differences completes the genus, and it also isn't a part of it, right? Because remember, a genus can only potentially have all these differences. Because if it had them all at the same time, there would be a contradiction. And some traits, like the inclination to have intercourse, right, which is a biological trait, are only inclinations that are aligned with a substance's nature. But they are not specific differences, meaning that these differences are not something that modifies the essence in as much as it is to separate the thing from, from another species. So let's recap. Specific differences are those who properly make a species different and modifies the essence to make it differ from another essence, and are comprehended in the essence or nature. inseparable differences or accidents are things that are temporary that just pass over, like, being ill, being healthy, etc. Inseparable accidents or differences are like really stuff you can't really remove, right? But yet they do not pertain to the nature of a thing. For example, white or black, your eye color, right? Let's see. Your signate matter, right? Hint, if you don't know what that is, watch Aquinas. Signate matter is designated matter, by the way, which is when individuals are individuated, since that is the Thomistic thought. Obviously, there is differences. Like, for example, I believe Suarez believe that humans are individuated by the form and not matter. But that's just presupposing that. Okay, so yeah, thank you for watching. I will be making more videos. Have a good day. Ciao.